What's up, everyone? This is Alex, and you are listening to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Radio Podcast. This podcast, as always, is sponsored and brought to you by Choke Aloha. Be sure to check out chokealoha.com, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu Radio, and get 10% off your entire order. I finally got word that this week they will be releasing a limited edition spats and shirt. And they're also going to be releasing some classic designs pretty soon. And you will get 10% off when you use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu Radio. So thank you very much to Choke Aloha for all the support. Now, on to the podcast. This episode actually came by a little bit by accident. I have been meaning to get Dr. Corey Peacock onto the podcast for quite some time now. Pretty much since day one. Schedules never really met up, and then we ran into each other one Friday morning, and kind of was just busting his balls about him dodging me, and he asked me if I wanted to do the podcast that evening, but I kind of misunderstood him and thought he wanted me to record his podcast. I've actually been trying to get him to start his own podcast with professional boxer and kickboxing world champion Chris Algieri for quite some time now. I think schedules and everything's been a little hectic for everybody, and it never came to fruition. So I thought, hey, all right, I finally get to get them to record their podcast. Show up at his office, and next thing you know, it's kind of a little bit of confusion, almost like a Three Stooges. I thought we're doing yours. No, we're doing yours. So, long story short, we were actually doing the Jiu-Jitsu Radio podcast, and I couldn't be more excited for this episode because we go into some pretty deep science from two of the best when it comes to sports nutrition, weight cutting, training, strength and conditioning. For anyone who is striving to be a professional athlete, this episode is a must listen. Please take the time to follow Dr. Corey Peacock and Chris Algieri. They are constantly putting up some amazing information as far as what they're working on. If you guys have time, I urge you to please bug them to finally get their podcast rolling, because you can tell that they're extremely passionate about what they do, and they have some amazing knowledge, amazing stories, and it's something that everybody can benefit from. They are definitely putting in a lot of time and work into what they are doing, and I think the end result would be something that would benefit not only the MMA community and the Jiu-Jitsu community, but any athlete that involves weight cutting and strength and conditioning and diet into their training regimen. So without any further ado, here is Dr. Corey Peacock and professional boxer Chris Algieri. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu Radio Podcast. My name is Alexis Turosa, and today I am joined, finally, after much poking and prodding, by my good friend Dr. Corey Peacock, and I'm pretty humbled to say that we have the world champ, welterweight boxer, and undefeated kickboxer Chris Algieri in the house.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Notice he's humbled to have you here. Doesn't care that I'm here.
Not so much. I've been around you long enough now. Yeah, get a little bit closer to the mic just so I can hear you.
For sure.
All right. Yeah. No, we've been around each other long enough.
We have. We've messed this up quite a few times now.
Yeah.
A couple of reschedules here and there.
I think it's been pretty good. So you guys actually just finished working with Volkan Ozdemir.
Yep.
Number 4 light heavyweight in the UFC, who's got a fight coming up. What did you guys work on?
Well, I just finished up a strength and conditioning session with him. He's fighting Jimmy Manawa, very dangerous, very strong, very powerful athlete in his own right. So really just creating a very powerful, strength-filled foundation for Vulcan is going to be really important as we move in closer to the fight. Chris also had a chance to speak to Vulcan and, work with them as well. Chris, you can kind of explain that a little bit further.
Corey's been telling me about Vulcan for a couple months now, and he asked me about, would like to work with him. And, I always say, let me meet him first. Let me sit down and let me go over some things with him, see where his head's at. And before I like to work with anybody, I'd like to look him in the eye and see where they're at in their career. And, the kid's got a lot of potential. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do this camp, and I'm looking forward to fight night.
You come from like a very unique place where you fought. You were the top of the top in boxing, top of the top in kickboxing, and now you have all that knowledge also of cutting the weight, and you're working with these other guys. Do you see something that is a common mistake that fighters make?
Yeah, I see a lot of common mistakes. Like you said, I actually went into my education to learn more about weight cutting and training and physical fitness for my sport, for my own body, my own use in my career. Right. Now I've got the experience to go along with the education that I had in place first, and I'm really just trying to kind of share that knowledge, and so we can kind of raise the bar of the sport on the whole. But in terms of your question, like common mistakes, I would really say the number one thing is guys are just not eating enough. Just
really?
Underfueled athletes. Yeah. I think fighters, and I think Corey can attest to this as well, are some of the most catabolic athletes out there.
Right.
They're constantly trying to lose weight. They're constantly breaking themselves down. Athletes fighters in themselves are athletes that are kind of like, they're raw and they feel like if it doesn't hurt, it's not good for them, and they're used to damaging and punishing themselves. So I think they carry that over into their training and into the whole training lifestyle. So they are a difficult group of population to work with for sure.
Do you find it's boxers make more mistakes than MMA fighters, vice versa, or it's kind of even all the way around?
Different pitfalls. A lot of times wrestlers have, UFC guys, UFC MMA fighters have wrestling backgrounds, so they're kind of used to cutting weight. They also have they're used to a structured training program or a structured strength conditioning program, or structure at all. And a lot of boxers do not. Most guys, some guys haven't even finished high school. Very few of them have any college athletic experience. So structuring their training camps are a little more difficult, I'd say, than the MMA fighters.
So Corey, you see this obviously because you've been around with the MMA guys so much. There's been so many changes and so many just kind of prying eyes now with the fighting sports in general, especially with the weight cuts. And now everyone's trying to figure out the best way for these guys to cut. You have one FC that does like guys have to be within 10% of their fight weight, and then you get guys like Johnny Hendrix who are totally missing weight, and now they're gonna have to bump up. Like he had to bump up a weight class.
Sure.
So do you guys feel like there really is a set way that people should be approaching this?
Well, I think we've really developed a system in the way that yes, it should be done. Right now, Chris and I are really compiling a lot of data on the work that we're doing together with a lot of these fighters, and definitely a future project in which we plan to unleash and kind of release here in the near future. But yeah, there's definitely a right way to do it. I think the sport, like you said, there's variety, but I think one thing in common that we can say is that the sport itself, especially MMA, is trying to do something about it. They're trying, even though it's a little bit different between organizations. They're making an attempt. Again, with this attempt, though, I think they don't have a lot to validate what the attempt is.
Right.
So it's kind of like we're going to throw a shot in the dark. We're going to throw 10% out there because
it is like it's a
that's
nice
10%.
small number.
That's a number that everybody understands. It's easy. If it's a 155er, it's 15 pounds. That's 10%, so everybody knows.
Right.
I think, again, like I said, we're doing this from a very scientific methodology approach aspect, and we really have this down to a system in which we're doing.
The little bit that I've seen you guys work with, the guys that I know that you work with, there's huge changes from old, like previous weight cuts they've done to stuff that you guys worked on. From my point of view, and obviously I work with a lot of the pros, and then I've got to deal with a lot of like the amateur guys for both jiu-jitsu and MMA.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that I see is people don't truly understand what they are actually doing to their body when they're trying to cut weight. I think really it's I'll lose a little bit of fat on the camp, and then the last week it's just all water weight. I'll just lose all water weight, and then I'll just rehydrate. But they don't really understand what they're doing to their body. Can you, let's say for the real basic amateur guy, give them a quick breakdown of what they are actually physically doing to their body?
Sure. I guess I'll start with the physiological aspect, and I'll kind of let you go into the actual detail of the cut. So when you look at it from a physiological standpoint, these athletes are really shifting their cardiovascular function. They're shifting their metabolic function. They're shifting their blood flow, circulation, vasodilation, vasoconstriction patterns, and, realistically altering their thermoregulation, their sweating, their dehydration, their rehydration patterns to a very, relatively drastic extent, and that has repercussions after the fight. You're going to see that where a lot of these systems, even though we try to get them to efficiently be there for fight night, and like I said, we've developed a system that's relatively good at this, there still are repercussions following that fight where those systems are going to be hindered for performance aspects, and that's where that off-season approach and trying to make those gains is really, really important. Stepping away from that, I'll let Chris kind of go more into what they're actually doing from a water loss, rehydration, and that kind of thing, more of the practical explanation of what they're doing on that fight week and across that camp.
So as long as the athlete is got a proper camp behind them, which isn't always the case. A lot of times guys get fights kind of dropped in their lap.
Especially MMA.
Yeah.
3 weeks, 2 weeks, 10-day. Vulcan, that's how he's in the UFC, 10-day notice.
A lot of guys got into the UFC that way.
Yeah.
It happens. And when that's the case, then you just got to make the weight go out there and fight. But when you have a guy who has a full camp and needs a 12-week camp, you're preparing his body to do what it's going to do that fight week, which ultimately comes down to it's water manipulation. You're taking the water out of their body, having them step on the scale, putting the water back in, and getting back to the weight that they did the majority of their training camp at. Right. So I've seen it tons of times where a guy will do his entire camp and he weighs around 200 pounds, and then he weighs in at 170.
Yeah.
And then he comes back up to 185. Well, the guy did the majority of his sparring at 200 pounds. He's a different guy. He's 15 pounds apart from fight night to where he does the bulk of his training. So, when you're expecting someone to have the performance outcomes like that, it's just not going to be there. Or you get the opposite. You get a guy who spent his whole camp at 190, weighs in at 170, he comes in at 205.
Yeah.
Now he's 15 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
He's a different guy in the cage than he was during his camp. So you really got to keep it within kind of finer limits that way. And I think it just logically makes sense that wherever you are at doing the bulk of your sparring, which is your basically race pace kind of training, that's what you should weigh going into the cage or the ring. Take that water out, put it back in, get back to that position.
So let me ask you guys from let's say like a percentage point. You got guys that they're cutting, like you said, from 200 to 175. They'll probably come back to 185, 190 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
How much of their peak performance is lost because of that weight cut? Because they're not – everybody obviously comes into fight night. Everyone's got a couple of bumps and bruises, some damages, whatever, but they're not going to be operating at 100%. Mm-hmm. Are they at like a 70, 80? Like what's the average?
It's hard to put a number to it, but I think Corey and I both agree that a 10% weight gain after the weigh-in is within limits and where you're probably going to get a guy – performing as close to optimal as he can. Once you get too far outside of that 10% limit. So if you got a guy who's a 170,
right,
and he's coming into the cage at 187, he's putting that 17, that 10% of 170 back on.
Right.
That's good.
Being like, not to cut you off, but then what about when you get guys after the whole IV ban?
Mm-hmm.
So then how does that affect even more? Because now you're still talking about 15, 17. Are you talking about pre-IV ban, post-IV ban, like in MMA?
Well, I think we're talking post.
Yeah.
And, I think an important aspect that I think, when Chris is kind of explaining this water manipulation and those kind of things, what you really have to consider is what is the weight that an athlete can properly put back on in terms of hydration,
Right.
and still do two very important things. One, replenish the electrolytes in which he lost in that very, very drastic last stage of his weight cut. And how well can he replenish the glycogen storage that he lost during the physical activity of preparing for this weight, for this fight, along with his diet manipulations and those kind of things. And I really think anything less than about that 8 to 10% window that, I'd say an 8 to 10% window, and you can't ever properly restore those two things to function, muscularly, physically, all of those things completely effectively like you would in your camp.
Yeah.
I think anything above that, and you're not allowing your body the proper timing, the proper ability to absorb those proper nutrients, where now your body's going into a state of something it's not used to, and it's probably getting rid of more than it's actually using and absorbing.
Right.
So I think you got to be really careful with that and keep it in that really fine window where too little, you're not going to absorb it. Too much, you're not going to absorb it because the body's going to go into kind of a shock state. What to do with it? Get rid of it.
So how do you guys find?
And sometimes you can see that with an IV, where people would put an IV in too quickly, and the body
just rejects it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. So
I've seen guys throw up. I've seen guys get the shakes. I've seen guys pass out.
For sure.
And what I look at that is that you're either in the wrong weight class or you didn't prepare to be in that weight class.
Absolutely.
And I think this comes down to something that those pre-camp assessments that Dr. Peacock will do, I will do myself with guys in terms of where they're at physically, where they're at in terms of body composition, meaning their body fat, meaning their lean tissue, meaning their body water content, and then with me in terms of their eating behavior, their nutrition-based knowledge, and figuring out what's the best weight class for this guy.
Yeah.
It's tough when you got guys that come to you like, I got to make this weight, and then you look at them like, this weight's not for this guy.
Yeah.
But this is their livelihood. You got to do what you got to do and to the best of your ability. But that's what I'm talking about. You need to be able to prepare your body to do what it's about to do.
Right.
For fight week, and I don't think a lot of guys do that.
For sure. I mean, look at how far Rumble went without doing that. I mean, he was walking around at 210, and he 220 would cut down to 175.
Ugh.
Like you could tell. Like that's not one of those things that just even from the weight cuts you could see how bad it was. Like you could tell just from his skin how dry and how ashy he was, and
flat.
And he would still, I mean, can you imagine if he tweaked his body enough to be able to get to that?
Yeah.
Like there wouldn't be someone alive in that weight division. Like there really wouldn't be.
There's barely anybody alive in the 205 division after they get in there with them.
Now, from your work, and I've heard you say it at least from some of the stuff I've seen you do on TV, you're kind of really bringing this more into the forefront for boxing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of boxing guys, like you said, that don't really pay attention to it. They just they still go old school. They throw the sauna suit, go run some laps, and show up.
Most guys don't even think about it, boxing guys, until fight week. Like they don't prepare at all. From what I've seen. And like you said, I think boxing more so than MMA is very old school, like you said, and antiquated in terms of its training systems and the modalities used to prepare these guys for these fights. It is a high skill sport, so a lot of guys are just working on their skill set, and their style and what works for them. But at the same time, man, I think you're seeing guys who are not performing at their ultimate best because they're not doing this the right way. You got guys who are killers in the gym, and then on fight night, they're just not the same guy.
It's a different person.
So what do you attribute that to? Like, is it just one of those old school?
Lack of knowledge.
Right.
It's not an easy thing. I spent $40,000 to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
I put myself through graduate school, in order to learn this stuff at the scientific level, so I could use it on my own career. I understand that most athletes, or not many athletes, can do that. So that's actually why I'm out here, kind of sharing this knowledge and helping people at this point, because I get it. I've done it, but it's not something that is realistic for other guys to do.
But do you remember a point in your career where you said, where that switch flipped and you're like, damn, I really got to look into this?
Honestly, it happened to me in high school. I was a wrestler, and I was killing myself to make weight. I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this. I had the skill set, and I wasn't cutting weight the right way. And I remember going to the state championships up in Syracuse. They held them back in New York. And day one, state champs, I was good. I won my first two matches. Day two, semifinals, this guy outweighed me by, I felt like 100 pounds. I couldn't believe we were the same weight class. I'm like, this is not the same guy from yesterday. I had gained 2 pounds. He'd probably gained 10, and I felt it. I felt every pound. And I realized that I was doing something wrong. And that's when I realized, I was like, listen, I need to figure this out. And I'm a science brain, science kind of guy, good in school when I was a kid. So I just hit the books.
Right. I mean, a lot of guys don't get it. For jiu-jitsu, for big tournaments, you come in day of, you weigh in that weight.
Yeah.
So there's guys that will cut a ton of weight, and then they compete, and they'll have like 6-7 matches. You're not talking about easy matches.
A lot.
You're talking about some beasts.
Yeah.
And they're going to fight. It's like so
deprived and so depleted and so susceptible to injury. That's the scary thing.
Oh, that's
about
nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
And jiu-jitsu is such a mental game. You gotta be sharp. You gotta be sharp and reactive. It's very difficult to be sharp and reactive when you are that depleted.
Well, it's a mixture of not only are you depleted, but then you get into the bad situations. So then you start freaking out. And if you freak out, then you're putting your body into an even more of an adrenaline dump, and you lose everything that you worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow these guys still push through. I don't know if you guys watched it. A few weeks ago, they did the World Championships for Jiu-Jitsu. And, I mean, guys are getting their foot snapped. People are holding on. They're still keep going on. It's like, I want to say it was Braulio Stima a few months ago. He was just warming up. Tore quad or hamstring, I forget, but they literally, you see it like they had to tie his legs to keep the muscle from rolling back and wheeled out.
Doc, you can talk about that. Obviously, there's something going on there if the guy's getting hurt warming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the fact of the matter. They're coming in so depleted that all muscular function from a cellular level isn't there. I mean, you got to think about, when you look at muscle tears and all of those things that go along with it, where that's actually coming from. That's just coming from the collagen, the functioning of the actual muscle itself. And when you're depleted that much water-wise, I mean, that's what you're going to see. You really have to think about that. The entire cellular function of the actual muscle is so driven off of calcium and your electrolytes. What carries those? It's water. These guys are just coming in so dehydrated and so susceptible to improper muscle firing and injury. It's ridiculous.
So, I mean, what do you guys think then? Because there's some tournaments, I think ADCC, where you have to be the same weight 2 days in a row, and guys are still cutting it. So now you're stuck holding it for 2 days. Is that something that you really feel that's just, there's no point in putting yourself through that? They need to cut that out.
So I get asked a lot of times, not by jiu-jitsu guys per se, but by boxers, mostly amateur guys. And they ask me, like, I got to lose this weight. What should I do? Move up a weight class.
Right.
You're an amateur. You're not getting paid for this.
It's not worth it.
No. Why?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a 3-round contest. The guy who's faster is going to win. Be faster and feel good. I'd much rather see a young guy, train hard, be fueled, and be prepared to go out there and do what he has to do, rather than cut the weight and win because he's bigger.
Right.
Because honestly, in these high-skill sports, the bigger guy doesn't win. The better guy wins.
Yeah.
So a couple pounds is not going to make a big difference.
Yeah. Well, you get guys like Bas Rutten, they preach the biggest thing that it comes down to your cardio. Mm-hmm. The guy with the best cardio is always going to win because someone's going to gas out. And then, well, guess what? I'm still feeling 100%. Yeah. So you'll be able to fire on all cylinders.
The great Tony Ricci, who's my nutrition mentor and someone that I know Dr. Peacock looks up to quite a bit, he preaches constantly that combat sports, the base biomotor ability is endurance. If you need to have a tank, because at the end of the day, everybody's at the highest level. Everybody's good. Everybody's fast. Everybody's strong. Who's going to be in better shape? Who's going to have the better mentality? Who's going to be? And honestly, your mentality and your psychological has a lot to do with how your body feels. Yeah. So if you're in great shape, there's no bigger confidence boost in the world than being in tip-top elite shape.
Right. You come in feeling like $1 million, you're going to perform like it.
Oh yeah.
You might get caught, but you're still going to perform like you're $1 million.
Exactly.
So back to my original question. I think one thing that most people don't realize is the actual damage that they're doing to it. I know you're talking about, down to the cellular level, but you get guys that end up their kidneys shut down, right? Mm-hmm. And then you end up drinking like distilled water for forever, which is super bad for you. Yeah. Give the people listening just kind of an idea of what these mistakes are doing to their body when they do stuff like that.
So people will call it metabolic damage. Mm-hmm. You're damaging your. That's not true. It's actually metabolic adaptation. So our bodies are extremely, extremely adaptable. You see it all across really time. whatever dietary restrictions there are, what you have available to you, the human body is really adaptable, and we'll figure it out. You see these guys, like you said, these guys who cut weight multiple matches in a row, but they still go out there and do it.
Right.
And some of the best guys in the world do that. So obviously their body has adapted to being able to do that. The long-term effects of that is something that hasn't been studied, but I'm telling you, there's going to be issues. You see it all the time with athletes who maybe have been cutting weight their whole life, and then when they retire, they blow up.
Yeah.
Their body's adapted to a certain super low caloric intake, and they've got that deficit all the time. Their body has kind of gotten used to doing that by hedging really their hormones and we're all hormonal machines to be able to perform at the level that they're at. That doesn't change right away. It doesn't go right back to normal. You have to train your system, train your metabolism. And these guys have trained their systems to work at such low intakes that that's what the new set point becomes. So getting that back to normal, again, the metabolism has adapted to that, or getting it to readapt to what's normal. It takes a lot of time. I don't think guys really understand that.
For
put
sure.
the time in to fix it.
Yeah. Like we talked about, it's an old school mentality of, you put on the sauna suit, you're doing this and this, that, and the other. People see the results, but they never understand, why am I getting these results? And you can tweak it, but you could get the same results without putting all this, your body through all this damage.
That's exactly where Dr. Peacock comes in. This guy studies the numbers.
Yeah, and kind of jumping off of what Chris was just saying about the whole idea with the hormonal animal and stuff like that, you have to really think about two really important hormones that we look at that are really geared towards performance. You're going to have insulin that is going to really drastically influence the recovery response.
Yeah.
You're going to have the catecholamines or adrenaline, which is going to be a very important hormone in terms of muscle contraction and firing performance the night of the fight. So any sort of shift that your body is going to take out of the norm or away from homeostasis, these two hormones are going to be released into the body.
Right.
Anything away from normal metabolism, they're going to be released because they sense change. And that's
I don't like change.
The body doesn't like change. So the idea is, if we're hormonal animals and we need those hormones drastically, especially fight night, especially performance, and we're utilizing them or wasting them or releasing them at times when they shouldn't be released,
right,
we're ultimately affecting everything. Not only performance, but the influences that these are going to have on some of the other hormones during the recovery states of practice, weight cuts, and all of those things. So it's a really, really, it's just it's exactly that. When it's not done properly, we're not performing optimally.
That's what I meant by hedging the hormones.
Yeah.
Your body, you're lacking the energy, you're lacking the substrate. Your body makes up for it. It bridges the gap using those hormones, and you can overwork those organs that produce those things. Adrenal fatigue, you see that. That's a real thing. People don't it's just tired.
Yeah.
No, when you're drinking energy drinks that you go to train, or your pre-workouts, and then you're going super hard, and then you're not eating afterwards. What's providing that energy? It's
you need the fuel.
Yeah, we see athletes who have you've got light heavyweights who are eating 1,500 calories a day, training twice a day, hard for weeks. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't add up. But the human body is that amazing. It has these organs that can produce hormones that allow you to do things that you're not supposed to be able to do.
It's kind of like a self-fight or flight system for itself.
Exactly what it is.
And let's be really honest too. The fighter's a different athlete. Everything that I study as a physiologist, everything that I've been taught throughout my education, I have a doctorate, I have 3 degrees in this field, has been challenged with this fighting population, with this combat athlete population. Everything that I know, believe in, studied, researched is challenged with this population. So, like what Chris is saying, some of the capabilities that these athletes have in very drastic approaches, imagine the capabilities that these athletes have if it's done efficiently, properly, and effectively.
So let me touch off of something that you brought up, Chris. Let's say someone goes through the whole process. They do everything right. They do the weight cuts like you guys would suggest someone to do. How much does that alter the effect that a fighter would get once that adrenaline dump hits? Because the adrenaline dump is a very, very real thing.
It's real.
I've experienced it in jiu-jitsu matches. I'm sure you've probably had it a few times. How much is that affected by the training and nutrition and everything that a fighter's gone through leading up to the fight?
I think that's a tough question. I feel like one of the last podcasts Chris and I have done together, the topic of sports psychology was brought up and brought into play. And I do have to believe, like we said, when you look at the effects of hormone, especially adrenal dump and looking at adrenaline and all of those things, let's just talk to a basic population about something like anxiety or a panic attack. That's real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not something that doesn't happen. Like people are like, well, it's in your head. Well, yeah, psychologically you convince your body to you convince your body to react in a certain way hormonally with adrenaline, those things. But that's real.
Yeah.
That stuff happens to the body and it's released. And I think this is the same thing when you look at it from a sports psychological standpoint. Can perfect preparation and all of those things decrease this adrenal dump? If you have full confidence in what you're doing, then yeah, I would think from a psychological standpoint it can. But I do think, and I think I see this, and I'm sure Chris can attest to this, where he was talking about, those killers in the gym that don't show up to fight. Sometimes that's very psychological. I've seen this before with some of our fighters. Some of our fighters with some of the best skills and best abilities can talk themselves out of their abilities psychologically. And I think that comes down to the same thing, where I don't know the right answer, and I think I may have just got off track just a bit. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we answered the question, but I think we also hit
honestly,
like
I don't
15
think
topics.
so. I don't think so, Doc. I think you're right on the money. I think this comes down to a psychological thing.
Yeah.
And it comes down to psychological training. It comes down to how strong is your mind. I've said it before, at the highest level, everybody's good, everybody's fast, everybody's strong, everybody's good at what they do.
Yeah.
But the best guys are separated by their psychology.
Yeah.
It's about their mental. I'm sure you can attest to that big time in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Big time.
That's probably the biggest aspect.
Yeah. I mean, if it's almost in any sport, if you feel somebody break, let's say for jiu-jitsu, our matches are 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, whatever.
By the way, not to put you up, that's the best fucking feeling in the world.
Oh, it's the best. It's like you're a king of the mountain right there. Let me ask you then. Let's get out of the science aspect of it. Mm-hmm. When have you felt it where you broke somebody in the ring?
Ruslan Provodnikov. I knew I broke him. I felt him getting weaker and smaller as the fight was going on. I could see in his face that he wasn't happy being there.
I mean, let's be honest. If you're gonna be punching me, I'm not gonna be happy either, Chris.
I mean, as bad as my eye looked in that fight in those later rounds, I was comfortable. And in between every round, they asked me if I wanted to stop the fight or if I wanted to quit. There was at no time where I hesitated in any way, shape, or form. I said, no, I'm good to go. I'm winning the fight. I'm not getting hit anymore. I'm fine. I'm good. Going into that final round, Freddie Roach said, you need a knockout to win this fight to Ruslan. My guys were like, keep doing what you're doing. I knew I was winning the fight. And I knew going into that last round, I was like, listen, I gotta finish this round. I gotta work hard. I can't see a goddamn thing out of this eye. I literally, if you watch that last round, I was moving just to move because I couldn't really see where he was anyway. I was throwing punches. I had no depth perception at all. I had one eye, and I was trying to find out where he was. I couldn't really hit him because he was there, but I just kept moving and working, and I just knew that my movement was going to give him so much trouble that he was like, God damn it, this guy's still here. He's still going. So when that round ended, it was like, I got it. But I mean, really, that's my favorite thing. And I said even after that fight, I think I actually said that before the fight. I said him and Ruslan, have a lot in common. We both break our opponent's will, and people scoffed. He breaks it by literally physically breaking them. I break it. He physically breaks. He's a monster. He breaks people. I break people by breaking their will, breaking that inside that will to win, that desire to be there anymore. When you got a guy in front of you who doesn't want to be there anymore, man, that's when you just take over and have fun. Yeah,
and then you realize, like, shit, I got another, 20 minutes of this.
I got to deal with this guy for another 20 minutes.
It's so bad. It's a bad feeling. I mean, I've been there, like, on the giving and the receiving end, so it's definitely not fun.
Yeah, sure.
So what do you guys really have going on as far as what you plan to put out there? Because it sounds to me like you guys have, like, a product that you really want to push out there. Because from what I've seen just on your work, Corey, like the couple of years I've been around you, I've seen you make such a shift on the MMA world with the product that you put out there. I don't like to refer to people as product, but the fighters are your product. What they end up doing on the cage is a big product.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The performance of the fighters definitely influences, our impact as coaches, strength coaches, nutritionists on the sport itself. Realistically, and I don't want to say lucky enough because I don't believe that this is luck. I believe that this is the impact of doing things properly. We're winning, These fighters that I'm working with.
Did you just go Charlie Sheen on me?
We're winning.
No,
seriously.
Tiger blood.
I'm being serious. And, I can't say that, I guess looking at this from my aspect of strength and conditioning and periodization and those kind of things, I think I've really contributed an ability for those coaches around me, for those fighters around me to understand how to do things properly. And I think that's been the biggest thing. So, what are we working on together and what is our shift in this sport? This is something that we truly, the two of us, care about. This is how Chris makes his, this is how Chris has made his living up until this point as he's kind of making this transition, still fighting and now, coaching athletes
right.
and this kind of thing. I know he's been coaching for a long time and, competing. And, realistically, this is something that I'm approaching 3 years just in the MMA world and, 3 degrees and a lot of years in the football world.
Yeah.
This is something that we truly, truly care about. And we truly want to make an impact to improve all of these things. We can sit here, we can laugh, we can joke. But these are serious issues that when Chris and I get together, this is no bullshit. We talk about this 99% of the time. What can we do to change this? Where are we going? And I think it's a lot of times it's us throwing out 500 ideas of things that we can do in this sport, but really narrowing it down.
Right.
It's kind of been our problem. What do we really want to do? Chris and I had a really great visit out in Phoenix. We were at the International Society of Sports Nutrition National Conference, and I feel like a lot of people were talking to us about weight cuts and proper training and all of those questions. And we had a chance to go visit the Excess facility, who spent a lot of time working with UFC athletes and combat athletes and all of those things. And I find speaking with them, we a lot of the questions that I think we see outside of this is still that weight cut point.
Yeah.
Chris and I really, when we left there, I think they really provided some clarity on where our direction and where our product is going to go. And, and I guess really looking at what you're even asking us, you bring us in here, what's the first thing you're asking us about?
A weight cut.
Yeah, because it's that element that people don't know a lot about, and there's not a lot of science to back it up.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're going to bring in 50, for me as a researcher at a university, what are you going to do? You're going to bring in 25 people, you're going to dehydrate them to the point of what people or research literature would say is death, and then rehydrate them? Nobody here is going to.
Yeah,
nobody's going to let us do it.
I'll tell you right now, if I'm not going to get to punch somebody in the face and get paid for it, I am not cutting weight.
Yeah, I don't feel like risking my kidneys shutting down for so you can write a paper on it.
But that's the thing, though. That's the misconception is what these general populations can put their bodies through compared to what these athletes can put their bodies through are two totally different things.
Different species.
So it's kind of like it's one of these things where Chris and I have a resource that not a lot of people have in this world.
Yeah.
And so with that resource and with that data and with that product, I can speak for what we've talked about. I think Chris and I are going to make a really drastic impact in this approach to the weight cut.
I feel just from being around you so much and listening to a lot of the stuff you guys put out there, it's almost like the weight cut is the challenge.
Yeah.
But the answer to that challenge doesn't lie within the techniques of the weight cut itself. It's everything leading up to the weight cut.
Yeah.
And
that's very fair to say.
And like the nutrition of it is obviously the big part of it. Why do you feel it's been such a puzzle? Like you said, there's no real science behind it. There's no statistical data as behind it. But why has it been taken so long for people to be like, hey, we need to assess this?
Well, I think let me ask a question to Chris, and I think this can, my question can lead into an answer. How many fights have you had as a boxer?
24.
Have 24 of your weight cuts went the same?
No.
And I think that you can kind of go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. That's part of the reason, like Corey just alluded to, is that no one weight cut is the same. No one person is the same. You are dealing with combat athletes it's the most individualized sport in the world.
Yeah.
It's not like sprinters. It's not like, okay, everyone's fast twitch. Everyone has to be fast. And you basically have a genetic ceiling to how fast you could be. All the Olympians on the line running for gold in the 50-meter, they pretty much have the same genes. They're all super fucking fast and super explosive. Fighters are not that way. You can have a guy who's not explosive at all and be a world champion. I've done presentations talking about this specific thing for boxers. You got a guy like Willie Pep versus Mike Tyson versus Sugar Ray Leonard. You've got 3 guys that master different biomotor abilities but are still considered some of the best fighters who ever lived, best boxers ever lived. You've got a guy like Willie Pep, who is an endurance guy. Wasn't really particularly fast, didn't have any power. One of the best fighters you've ever seen. Mike Tyson, all power, all explosion, not great endurance. One of the best fighters you've ever seen. Sugar Ray Leonard, kind of like a mix, like a hybrid athlete. Fast, but not the fastest. Strong, but not the strongest. But again, one of the best fighters you're ever going to see. Yeah. So like, there's no category for these combat athletes. That's I'm using an example for boxing, but MMA is the same way.
Oh, for sure. And that's it. There's even more pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's probably even more complicated to kind of put together the perfect MMA athlete. I don't think there is one because it is a skill-based sport as well. So it makes it that much more individual. And when it comes to weight cuts, every weight cut is different. I work with a fighter, Dennis Bermudez. He's got 10, 11 UFC fights at this point, maybe even more than that. The way he's able to cut weight is completely different than another fighter I work with, Ryan LaFleur. They got completely different body types. Their bodies metabolize nutrients completely differently. They're able to pull different amounts of percentages of their body weight in order to make the weight. Sometimes they're super easy. Sometimes they're hard. And I've been with these guys now, all of Ryan's UFC fights, Ryan LaFleur, and probably 3/4 of Dennis's. And not any of those cuts have ever been the same.
So then what do you feel, not that I'm trying to pick up because I know you said you didn't want to talk about other people.
Well, I got something to go off that.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I just think this is funny because, one of my fighters, Michael Chandler, just competed over the weekend. And I'm thinking about this whole week and thinking about his communication with me. So Michael's a lot different, I think, than a lot of the fighters that I deal with in the regards that Michael asks a lot of questions. Michael comes from a collegiate background, a collegiate wrestling background, and everything needs to have an answer for him. And obviously it's just a testament to who he is, a 2-time world champion. And
he's a professional.
He's a professional.
Mike's a badass. I like that guy a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing Mike said to me, it was funny because it's fight week. We're going through the weight cut, and he sends me a picture of his prior 3 weight cuts and the directions that I have for this week. And he says to me, "Why is this different? Why is every number different here from week to week?"
Are you bullshitting me right now?
What he can't figure out is there's a couple different things, certain weight checks, certain weight markers throughout the camp, certain markers that we see when we go with our physiological analysis from a resting metabolic rate to a DEXA scan. To how much water is he holding throughout the camp. These things all play a role in what we do. Yeah. I can say, Chris and I can pretty much consistently say we keep a lot of what we do to certain percentages based off of these metrics that we read. But, to them, it's just like, okay, why is this 167? Why is this 164? Why is this 166? Why is this 169 in terms of weight? It's just a number to them. Yeah. They don't realize there's a percentage that goes off with this. But, he really questioned that. And I thought, I kind of looked at it and I was like, this is kind of funny because, you know what? In my head, this weight cut is going exactly the same to me based off of the numbers and the metrics and those kind of things. But realistically, when you just laid it out on paper for me from just a plain number aspect, which everybody understands, it's different. Yeah. Like every number is different here and all of these different goals and where he should be on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, how many gallons of water he should be consuming based on the things that we saw during this. How much is he shedding over the night? These things are all different in terms of the number value, but in terms of the range and percentage value, it's all the same to me. So I'm thinking differently than a number, but to the fighter or to the athlete, it's a number.
Well, it's human nature to find a pattern.
Yeah.
And that's when
and
it comes to
pattern's different.
Right, but it's almost it's physically impossible to try and find a pattern in that because you're never exactly the same person.
Sure.
From the last fight may have been 6 months ago, may have been a year and a half ago. your body is completely different. It may be around the same range of how it reacts and acts to certain things, but it's completely different. So you have to be able to just kind of pull from your knowledge of like, oh shit, well, we got to do this and got to do that and this, that to balance everything out.
Right.
So I mean, I've seen it with the bodybuilders that I've been around with.
Bodybuilders the same way.
Yeah, and it's even worse. It's like
it's worse
because it's almost like a homeopathic like answer to stuff. Like, oh well, you're here. Well, you should do this and do that. And from an outsider looking in, it's just kind of like, is this guy serious or is he just pulling stuff out of his ass? Because that sounded like that answer just came out of thin air.
Sometimes it's both.
You know,
sometimes it's a mental game. Just
it happens, and that's why even like with Vulcan meeting him today, like I need to be in front of this guy and hear what his situation is,
right?
Because I don't know until I'm there. You know, it's very difficult to do these things. You know, it's fun. This is funny. So I get DMs all the time. People are like, hey, can you make me a meal plan?
Yeah, like
I can.
You
sure,
got the money.
Sure. No, not even that. No, sure I can.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are.
Right.
I don't know what you are. I don't know what you're made out of. I don't know what you eat. And you can't do that.
Here, chicken, broccoli, you'll be fine.
Well, it's a bastardized system because, let's be honest, all I need to do is add the word fit after my Instagram name and people are going to think that I'm a pro. Yeah, and it's like you get people who have no experience whatsoever in sports.
No credentials, no licensure, no education.
Nothing. They just have a couple of booty programs, you know. It's like go up the steps.
Gifted.
Yeah, and it's like, come on, like you're really going to just take this? I bet you if you go look at their high school photo.
Or scientifically enhanced.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, come on, like you got to have. First of all, that's kind of disrespectful to you because, like, well, guys, like that's 10, 15 years worth of fucking experience back there, and you just want to sit there and have it on a piece of paper on a spreadsheet for an 8-week program so you can look good this summer.
Yeah.
Well,
shit doesn't work that way.
I'll tell you right now, you're just saying it because now you're just getting under my skin. It's like, you know, I look at some of these fighters and, you know, some of the guys I deal with and, you know, again, you know, I'm a physiologist, strength and conditioning coach. I have a sports nutrition certification, but by no means do I consider myself a sports nutritionist like Chris and the other. You know, I know enough to be dangerous and to be able to contribute to what these guys are doing and to help make modifications. But, you know, it's not, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not going to claim that I am. But when they bring me a program and they say, hey, look, this bodybuilder wrote me this program, and then I get on there and see something as basic as like the grams don't match the calories or something like that I'm like, there's a problem. Or I see my athletes consuming a third of what they're actually burning in a day. Then it starts to, it kills me inside.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
you're just plugging in random numbers.
I want to just, you know, I'm serious. And it's always like written on just like a piece of like notebook paper. And it's like, I just want to grab it and shove it in my mouth and just chew it out.
There's your calories.
Like, you know, so you're right. It's one of those things. This is the worst field.
I mean, even
in
just
terms of that, but like, you know, it's the most rewarding field for me. Obviously, it's my passion. It's what I love to do. But it's also the worst field that like just drives me nuts.
Well, it's disrespectful to the work that you put in.
Sure.
Because I mean, you go so deep into it as far as to like the mechanics and the science behind it.
It's my livelihood.
Yeah.
This is what I consider my livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, you spent the nights and you spent the weekends to sit there and get there to get that knowledge. And people think they can just do it by copying, pasting some bullshit program that they probably bought someplace else. And they don't. I guarantee you, they didn't even bother taking a look. It's like, well, they didn't even ask the person, do you have any allergies? No. Do you have any problems?
That's what I mean. Like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're made of. I don't know what issues you have. But like, even like into something more practical. When fighters, so I used to get hired just for weight cuts. Yeah. And I used to do that. I don't do that anymore because like we talked about this whole time. Like if your body's not prepared for that weight cut, I'm not going to sit there while you torture yourself. Yeah. And post claim that I helped you make weight. I can't do that. You know, like I've dragged guys through weight cuts before early in my career. I'm like, I won't do that anymore. So when Daniel Jacobs brought me on for the Triple G fight, brought me out 8 weeks out. Yeah. I was with him the entire time. That dude's body was primed to make the weight.
I watched the video you making him like lunch and everything. That was pretty funny.
Dude, so it's funny. It was like, oh, you know, I did an interview with guys like, oh, so you know, like it's probably awesome having you as a cook. And I'm like, I looked at it, I was like, I'm not a cook. Yeah.
That was the best. You have to watch it. I was just,
Algieri.
I forget where I was. I was just like, I forget if it was on TV or it was online, and all of a sudden your face popped out. I was like, what the fuck is Chris doing? Like chopping up fucking onions or something.
Chef
Algieri.
Like,
yeah, Chef Algieri. I was like, Oh man.
Yeah, but I need to remind me. I'm not a cook. I just like to cook, and it just worked out that I cook. I'm a performance nutrition coach, man.
Yeah.
I sit there. I'm telling you what you should eat. Normally you'd have somebody else do it, but I was in camp and I know Danny well, and I was like, you know what? I'm here. Let's save some money. Well, save you some money or make me some money. One of those things.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both, and I'll just do the whole thing.
So I don't know if you guys paid attention to the fights over the weekend where Johnny Hendrix didn't make weight. And then he claims that his wife was sick a month out. He was fine the whole time. And then the second he cut weight, he got a cold and completely missed weight.
Gotcha.
Which I would totally understand if he hadn't missed weight before, like a bunch of times.
Multiple times.
So what do you think that really attributes to? Because it could be just laziness, just not really giving a fuck. Or it could be like, would a cold really affect it that much? I mean,
honestly, I don't know, Johnny. I'm a huge fan of Johnny. I think Johnny.
You don't have to talk trash.
Fights.
I'll talk trash.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think he's had great fights. I mean, he's a world champion at one point or another. But something, and I think everybody can agree to this, something's went drastically wrong in that process for him to have these issues and have these problems. And it could be any one of those things, but I would have to say probably a combination of all.
But it makes no sense to me if someone who was a collegiate wrestler, high-level wrestler, he's done it perfectly so many times.
Sure.
And now all of a sudden it's just going...
But then, okay, so you're saying something and you're making a huge assumption.
Yes.
Is he really done it perfectly? What if it's been...
He's made the weight.
Okay, he's made the weight. And that's what I mean. That could be the biggest issue here is that he may, and from what I've heard, I've never met him. From what I've heard, he's a really big guy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just the case. Nothing's been right this whole time in this process.
And it's just body's
it's gotten
not doing
through
it.
him so long. And like I said, looking at these, I take a very scientific approach, looking at these physiological measures, cardiovascular, metabolic, and the list goes on and on. These things, in terms of human physiology, when you study these things, aren't really, there's certain markers that really aren't supposed to change a lot throughout throughout preparation and all of those things. It's kind of like your genetics allow you to be this strong or this in shape or this fast or this whatever. This process of camp, weight cut, fight alters these things way more drastically than scientific literature says that they should be altered.
Right. True.
So again, looking at these guys from pre-camp to pre-fight to post-fight, I have three, if I'm looking at this on paper from a physiological standpoint, I have three different people in front of me.
Yeah.
And this is the same person in a matter of 10 weeks.
Yeah, if you were just looking at the numbers, you would say that it's physically impossible for someone to be doing this.
So, with that said, I guess it's just like we said, how much can the body take? How long can the body take this before it starts to react against this? And, that could be something that Johnny's dealing with and, a career decision as to where he needs to go in terms of weight class. Right. Maybe something he needs to think about. And I can't speak for him. Maybe it is one of those things that he hasn't put the work in and he knows that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to interject with a little bit of fighter insight.
Go for it.
What a fighter tells you in the public actually happens.
No. Not what a fighter tells you in the public. What a fighter tells you to your face, like as a coach.
Are generally entirely
for sure.
different things. So if he tells you got a cold, who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe he had a cold on top of a lot of other things that happened.
Well,
maybe he had a massive ankle injury that you didn't know about, and he couldn't do his cardio and anything.
Well, look at what happened with Khabib Nurmagomedov, at his last fight.
Sure.
He was eating tiramisu the Wednesday before the weight cut.
Right.
And then he's like, I can still make the weight. And then his kidney, or was it his liver, shut down? Yeah, exactly. His liver just completely shuts down, and they had to rush him to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this just popped in my head. A question for you guys is, let's say you finally get to make that shift happen in whether it's boxing, MMA, whatever. Do you feel that shift of the weight cutting process and the training process would help extend a fighter's career, or at least extend their peak?
1,000%. I think that if we had more athletes this is a big one for me, staying in shape in between fights. Come on, guys.
Common knowledge.
You're a professional. Common knowledge. It's the least thing. It's the least consistent thing you see.
Yeah.
Guys, you're a professional athlete. You're a professional. You don't have a season. Stay in shape in between fights. That prolongs guys' careers. Who are some of the longest careers we've ever seen? I'm always going to go back to boxing before. Brown Hopkins.
Yeah.
That guy eats. I've been around him eating.
He's vegan, right?
I'm not sure if he's a full vegan at this point, but I've been around him eating. He eats very, very light, stays very, very lean all year round.
Yeah. George Foreman, he uses the Foreman grill. Cuts the fat.
Randy Couture.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Extreme Couture. I lived in Las Vegas. I trained. That was my home gym for a while. Seeing that guy year round in shape, never misses a workout. He would travel all over the goddamn world at that point. That was a bunch of years ago when he was really busy doing movies and whatnot, but still fighting. He never missed a workout into his mid to late 40s. Probably still doesn't. A guy like that, that's a testament to exactly what you just said. Can you extend your career by doing this the right way? Duh. Look at the guys who have.
Yeah.
It's. I don't think there's a magic bullet here. These guys live the lifestyle. That's what it's about.
And I'm going to be honest with you too. Just again, this goes for not just stereotyping fighters, but just going for any sport in general that's professional. I mean, you're at the professional level. Anybody is looking for an advantage. Okay.
This is the most easiest one to grab
for sure. And you have something like USADA come in and clean up the sport, and
that's drastically changed a lot of things.
And it's drastically changed a lot of things. What do I think that's going to do to the sport? I do believe that's going to create, just like anybody would think in looking at genetics and hormones, it's going to become a young man sport at some point, because younger athletes are going to have a hormonal disposition to be more physically gifted in a sport like this. So with that said, if you can take somebody and prolong these hormonal effects and these performance effects and all of these things that we've discussed this whole time, you're going to prolong somebody's career and to be effective over that career as well.
With that being said, then, obviously the amount of work that they have to put in physically, the twice-a-days and all that stuff, drastically affects their hormones.
Sure.
Is that something that
needs to be changed too?
How would you change that?
Well, Chris, I think you were sitting in on this conversation too. Chris and I were at a seminar, and we were listening to a guy that does combine preparation for NFL athletes, Pete Bomarito.
Yep.
It was
awesome presentation.
Yeah, it was at Nova Southeastern University, where I'm an assistant professor as well. And one of the things he was talking about, he started to refer back to some of the literature and put me onto this literature, looking at certain periodizations and certain camp schedules and how to most effectively, for a short period of time, influence neural drive and neural function and those kind of things. So when I look at people doing a 2-a-day because I have to do 2-a-days every single day because this is what's said, or 3 practices because how am I going to fit in jiu-jitsu and wrestling and striking and this and that, it really bothers me, because if you're not getting and again, now just talking about in general terms, if we're not getting a quality session, is there really a point to do it?
Quality
to
over
me,
quantity.
No, you're teaching yourself shit habits. You're teaching yourself, you're teaching yourself poor neurological habits. If you're striking at 25%, you're teaching yourself poor motor habits and all of the physiological things that go along with that. So, to me, it's about really spreading these things out throughout an entire camp efficiently to keep that neural drive very, very high. And that's something that, Chris and I have really worked on. He and I have collected a lot of data, even just as with Chris as a subject.
He's being nice right now.
Yeah.
I've ground myself into the ground before, and he's been like, "You should really pull back a little bit."
How many times a day would you go? Like
2 or 3.
See, yeah,
really?
And then like Chris, says like what you say to the media. No, what he says to my face is even sometimes not true, because his way is right. No, but this is true though. Chris has run himself into the ground many a time.
Oh yeah.
And I saw some things in Chris's camps previously that have really become red flags to me of things that aren't going to allow him to perform. And I think Chris can agree that even though at the time, some of his sparring and some of his really important sessions were hindered because of the outside training, the unnecessary training that he was doing. And
I specifically remember you saying you can't redline every workout.
Yeah, and I remember, but then again, same thing. Listening to Chris, I remember Chris saying, kind of like Mike Chandler saying, "Well, why don't we talk about it? Why don't you just bring that data and because he didn't believe me."
Yeah, well,
You know
people
what I mean?
have that argument.
Well, because
it was cool.
He was pissed. No, he wasn't happy about it. He wasn't happy taking the criticism, and it was one of those things where it was going to be a point to prove me wrong or whatever the case was. But that wasn't the case. It's objective, and that's why I do a lot of the things that I do from a scientific, perspective. Is you can't argue with me in this when it's numbers.
Yeah. It's the diminishing return.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So when he sees the numbers,
especially when it coincides with how you're feeling, how you're performing.
Yeah.
If your session doesn't feel great, and then you're also seeing numbers that said you shouldn't feel great, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can. A fighter's mind is a very specific thing, and to admit that you weren't your best that's a whole fucking deal.
Yeah, you're opening up a different can.
So I'm not even gonna allow myself to think that I didn't have a good session. But then he showed me some numbers that said you shouldn't even had a good session. And you know what? I didn't have a good session. I'm gonna admit that now.
Okay, and another thing going into some of Chris's data, and some of the things that we've seen in the past, Chris and whoever else that was involved at the time in terms of coaching staff and those kind of things had a heavy bag workout that was supposed to be to act as, a little bit of technique, a little bit of power, but a relatively active recovery type day.
In between sparring days.
In between sparring days, okay? Let's focus on some of the fight technique. Let's get some of the combinations down. Let's get some power shots in just to fire that nervous system, and let's go. Those numbers from a water loss standpoint, from a body temperature standpoint, from a heart rate standpoint, from a movement standpoint, were a lot higher than what he was outputting in an actual sparring session, a 10-round sparring session.
So there's really no recovery.
So to me, worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, and again, this is how you learn. You know what I mean? I won't criticize. I won't anything, because if you ask me and if you ask Chris, I guarantee you Chris said after that heavy bag work and all that stuff that was a light day for him or an easy day for him because it's kind of ingrained in his head that that's recovery.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that. But then when we start to really look at the numbers, it's, well, fuck, like we've messed up here as coaches. And I carry this over into a lot of other sports where I've seen data, looking at certain things where, I've worked with some teams that have, they do a lot of GPS technology. And some of the things that there's a new culture shift in football where it used to be practices were set up kind of like if you were going to compete on Saturday, Friday you took off completely, Thursday was kind of a walkthrough, and then Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday were kind of your bulk practice days. Now people are starting to understand the nervous system a little bit more where if you're competing on Saturday, Friday the goal is to stimulate that nervous system the same way you would stimulate it during competition. Not as long, obviously you're not going to go for 3 hours like a football game would be or like a boxing match would be, but you stimulate the heart rate, you stimulate that neurological response to be very high so that the athlete's primed to go into that next day.
Right.
And these people will show me this data and they'll tell me that, we're doing something like our Fridays before game days are supposed to be super fast and super explosive, just like the game, but they're very cut down in terms of time. And then I look at the speed or the intensity or the physiological markers compared to what I see in the earlier practices or compared to the game, and they're only like 50% of that. Okay, so you've got out of this culture of like kind of the jog through or the walk through, but you're still not stimulating the system. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those things if that's the intent and that's the purpose, just like with Chris, if his intent and his purpose for that bag day and that pad day was active recovery or strategy, did he accomplish that? No, he might have had a great day in his mind. He might have got
session.
he might have got a lot of work,
right.
But it's not the intent.
Yeah.
Intent's the most important thing in this whole camp to keep that nervous system. So him having that really high volume day, how bad did he fuck up his Friday or Saturday?
Right.
You
burned out. Like you could have burnt out. Like mentally, you've gotten to the point where you're so strong, where you can sit there and say to yourself, "It was a great workout," because you told yourself, "I need to stop bitching about my workout."
Sure.
But physically, it's like, well, You fried your neurons, you fried your fast twitch muscles, and now when it comes to Friday, you're just going to be like lagging half-assed.
And it might have been in his mind or his, in his perception, the best that he could have output that day, but he doesn't realize that maybe it's not the best output that he could have put with.
He could have waited an extra 6-7 hours, and then he would have had an insane workout.
Like that, anything like that in these combat sports.
Well, like you say, like once, like Chris, it's that once you start getting tired, technique goes out the window.
Fatigue makes cowards of men.
Yeah,
that's a great quote.
That's exactly it.
Absolutely true. Man, can we switch topics? I'm getting beat up over here.
Yeah.
Well, I just have to use, I have to use you as an example.
That was totally not me.
Because I'm stuck looking at your data all day for all of this.
It's like Dr. Corey
I always
just
have
basically
Chris's data in front of me for some reason.
Chris, I know you're.
He's the easiest one.
I know you're a champion, but fuck you, fuck
Yeah.
everything you've done. Like you're killing
but
me right
hey,
now.
all right, what you just said too is another topic for me.
What?
It's like, okay, so some of these approaches that he's done, he's still a world champion.
Right.
Like, holy shit, then where do I come? So then it's like, how do I interject and come in?
Tell him the Henry Hoof story.
Oh, man. Wait, don't get me in trouble with Henry.
I don't even know which one to go with.
The first one. when
Stick my computer up my ass story?
Yeah, that's the one.
Don't get me in trouble with Henry now.
Henry, okay. Henry's, in my opinion, in terms of his demeanor and his personality, he's the best MMA coach that I've been around my entire life. You know what I mean? And one of the best coaches in terms of all sports.
Hands down, one of the best coaches of all time, regardless of the sport. Hands down.
Henry speaks his mind.
That's being Dutch.
Henry speaks his mind. And, in his mind, I think for the first 3 to 6 months that we worked together, he thinks that my degree's in, like, how to use computers or something like that. You know what I mean? And, like, for me to start gaining his trust, it really took a lot of different kind of, like, me making points that came to fruition and things like that, and athletes at risk for injury. And unfortunately, then we see injury and things like that, and it was kind of one of those things, cause and effect, but it made him and I, the relationship that we had, grow as to this point that we're at now where, myself along with Jake Bonacci, who, in terms of MMA strength and conditioning is, in my opinion, the best strength and conditioning coach in the actual,
Agreed.
In the actual industry, in the actual field, it really increased the trust of what Jake and I were really trying to accomplish with the rest of the team at that time with, Coach Greg and Henry and those guys, where they believed in what we were doing, and Henry says it now all the time. Look, I don't really get all that weightlifting stuff. I don't get what you're doing over there, but my guys are always 100% come fight night, and they're always healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot to what we're doing.
I mean, I can tell you from my experience around the camp before you came around, the way that I see everybody training is absolutely different. Every time that I see everybody comes in, they're like top shape. They're like top, like just performance output every time. I mean, obviously getting into like later on in the week, everybody drags down. But compared to when I first came in to the old gym and everything like that, for sure, hands down, everybody's performing at a way higher like RPM. And it's a shift from like when I was talking to you, Chris, about like the shift in the mentality of the training. Because you can go same old school, like we just grind it. Look at teams like AKA. Yeah. They're known for guys getting injured. Known for guys getting injured. And you think about it, it always happens the week before the fight or the week, like 2 weeks before the fight. It always happens that way. Right when everybody's supposed to start peaking, that's when they end up getting injured. So you start getting guys, all right, let's be scientific about this. Let's do this, and this. All right, take a day off. Like you guys were talking about before. Yep. Maybe you should take a day off. Take a night off. It becomes such a huge thing. And the active recovery, same thing. It's huge. Different performance from guys that I've watched fights for years. Yeah. Like now they're completely different fighters.
And there's such a trust in what
you have to. You have to earn that. You have to earn that. You know it from a football team. If someone comes in on a team, it's like it's going to take a while before you get that.
It takes time. It really does with this whole thing. But ultimately, I think it's like you said. Chris and I, we're trying to make an impact on this sport. We want to improve the sport. We want longevity in the sport for the fighters that we work with, the fighters that we care about. Chris as a fighter, and all of those things. We want to make an impact on what we're doing here in the sport, and we want it to last for a long time.
So
it's something we truly care about.
Let me ask you one last question before we take off, because we got to wrap things up.
Sure.
Do you think it's physically possible for someone to write a book that says how to cut weight?
No.
Right. That's what I was expecting.
He just stole the title of our textbook. So
how to cut weight. No.
Let me go ahead and throw my little copyright in there.
Yeah.
So the answer is no, but if you could, it would be Corey and I who would write it.
Right.
But no, I want to kind of go back a little bit upon why Dr. Peacock and I are doing this. And for me, it's twofold. One, people die in this sport.
Yeah.
In these sports.
We were just talking about it today.
More often than not.
Yeah.
More often than it is okay.
Yeah.
Once you get your second point out, let me come back to that. Because I'm pissed off.
Second point is, I don't know exactly how Dr. Peacock feels, but I know that I want to see these sports be big. I want to see them be the NFL. I want to see, the NFL, man, their guys, you're getting the most out of every one of these guys. Their potential is through the goddamn roof. And the money that's involved with their testing and their nutrition and their recovery. I want to see that for these gladiators who deserve it. These fights are old. These sports are old, super old.
Yeah.
Fighting is the oldest thing out there. And yeah, some of the top guys are really getting paid, but I think that there's room for improvement even at the highest levels with these athletes. Maybe we can get more years out of them. We can see some of these greats go even longer. We can see some of these greats come out of the sport the same guy that came in. We don't need these punch-drunk people walking out of these rings. Former champions.
It's awful to see
it's
that.
sad. It hurts. It hurts. I've been around a couple of pro boxers. Howard Davis was the first guy that I ever met that had you could tell like something was going on. And it hurt because he's a legend. I mean,
MMA guys aren't going to be any different. The sport is so young. We haven't gotten to the point where these guys.
We see it.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet. It's going to happen.
You see it physically on some guys, like physically as far as like their body, but not their brain.
Not yet.
Sure. And I guess I'm veering, but like you said, this was just something that really bothered me, and it still bothers me to this day. Like I don't know why it impacts me so much, but. There was an interview that I did a while back, one of the MMA outlets. I don't remember what it was, and at the time we were sort of starting to experiment with these basically brain scanners as infrared technology to recognize if there is some sort of bleeding within the brain. So if somebody gets hit, it's an easy process. You take this scanner, it's a 5-second process, scan, everything's good. That's the case. And I remember I did this article, and, basically the article was about taking further measures to instill these fighter safeties. There's been fighters that have had some sort of trauma to the head. They go sit backstage because maybe their coach or whatever the case might be has another fighter on that card. They're waiting for everybody. And, everybody's gone. Then some issue occurs and, they have some sort of catastrophic effect where when you look at something like head injury, medical attention is so timely and so drastic, okay? So my article was basically just that. We're using something to recognize it. We're not medical, we're not taking any steps, but hey, if we see a problem, we can at least get it to the right attention right away. And I put that article out, and a coach wrote something about, death in combat sports is less likely than, happens less than somebody choking on a grape and dying or something like that. It really ate at me to the point that I'm not going to get confrontational. I'm not going to get pissed off, but you're a coach. And to think that anything that can improve the longevity of your fighter's career, that could prevent, even if it's a 0.00001% chance, what if that's your fighter that's that 0.0001 that could prevent that? And I remember being so upset that I probably wrote 15 replies, deleted it all the way through, slept on it before I actually responded, just saying that, how dare you as a coach and somebody that should be caring about your fighters and the well-being of this sport could criticize any medical measure that may influence somebody you know, somebody you care about, some fighter you coach, or even anybody in the sport that you care about.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. So,
no, absolutely. I mean, look at what happened to Tim Hague just a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly right.
It's
sad.
And and you know it from being a part of football. It's one of those things that people just kind of neglected. How many guys have you seen that just fucking got rocked?
Too many.
Got rocked, and then the coach says, all right, get back out there, like a play later. It's tough,
many.
and it's something that really needs to be addressed properly. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to have you guys on here to talk about it, because even though we talked mostly about weight cut, at the end of the day, the weight cut does come down to the end of the amount of liquid that you have in your body does affect how your body reacts to the trauma that it takes.
The brain is just as susceptible to that in terms of hydration and brain injury and those kind of things. So,
well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time out here. I know I took up a little bit extra of your time. We should start wrapping up. Dr. Corey Peacock, Mr. Algieri, thank you guys so much for taking your time out on a Friday night to do this. I'm getting goosebumps just because I'm really, really grateful for you guys taking the time to share your knowledge and let me pick your brain, and me even remotely attempting to know what the hell I'm talking about as far as asking you guys questions and everything else. If you guys want to go ahead and shoot out your information for everyone to follow you guys and whatever else you have next, please go ahead and do so.
Sure. Peacockperformance.com, under construction, but will be up and running at full effect here in the near future. In terms of social media, Dr. C Peacock, DrCPeaCock. Follow, see some of the stuff we're doing. Send me messages if you have questions. I love interacting with people and that kind of thing. Chris?
First of all, thanks for having us. This is fantastic. Absolute pleasure to share some of our experiences and some of our knowledge. In terms of finding me, if you can spell my name, you can find me.
Pretty much.
Good luck spelling that last name, but find me on social media. Instagram, I'm pretty busy with. Most people know about my food posts. But
yeah, well, I mean, as a boxing fan, I'm just I'm very grateful for even being able to meet you, let alone be able to ask questions. And Corey, obviously, like just from knowing you and being friends for the past few years and being able to work with you on and off filming with the guys, super grateful to have you guys around. Please, everybody, make sure you follow Dr. Peacock and Chris Algieri online. Keep an eye out. I'm pegging these guys to start their own freaking podcast already.
It's coming. Chris, myself, and the great Tony Ricci we spoke about, it's on its way. Be ready for that podcast coming soon.
I told you I'd be more than happy to sit down and just run the board while you guys talk, just so I can at least be in the room and get some knowledge and everything. So make it happen.
A lot of knowledge coming through there.
Yeah. Make sure everybody goes and starts nagging these guys to start their own podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned to the next one. Have it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I want to take a minute just to thank Chris Algieri and Dr. Corey Peacock for taking the time to sit down with me and really just kind of schooling me and not even scratching the surface to the science and their knowledge when it comes to weight cutting, sports nutrition, and strength and conditioning and everything that we talked about. I can't even remotely say that I have a fraction of the knowledge that they do, but I tried my best to really kind of dig in and hit the questions that I think are important or would be really beneficial for all you guys to hear. I hope that I can get them back on, because there's a million other questions I could be asking them, and there's a million other stuff that we could go over and things that I could ask Dr. Corey Peacock and Chris about just MMA and strength and conditioning and everything in general. So if you guys enjoyed it, please share this with your friends. Post it on Instagram, post it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Please follow Chris Algieri and Dr. Corey Peacock on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media that they're on. Let them know that you want them to start their own podcast, because they do have a ton of knowledge and they are really putting in their passion and effort into doing something that would benefit the MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, and fighting sports in general, as far as the health and well-being to all the fighters, and really to help fighters get a longer and more successful career. So thank you again to Dr. Peacock, Chris Algieri. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who takes the time out to let me know how much they enjoy the podcast. Please just continue sharing it. Again, I don't get paid for any of this stuff. I just do it because I really enjoy doing this. Thank you to Choke Aloha for the support. Be sure to check out chokealoha.com and use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu Radio. This week they are releasing new stuff, so make sure you check them out. And thank you guys again for everything. Follow me on Instagram. Check out my blog, mycosmicjourney.com. I will be updating it as much as possible and putting up new stuff. If you're interested in my photography or my videos or anything like that, Sonder Marketing is my company, so check it out. I do sell prints of certain things that I take photos of, not so much as the MMA guys, but more of the ocean and surf photography stuff that I do. So if you guys want to support me financially, that's the best way to do it. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.